1:30 to 2:15 this afternoon, and when they return, they'll take a vote on final passage of the Farm Bill, and that vote's scheduled for 2:35 p.m. Eastern. Now, live to the Senate floor, here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order, and the Chaplain, retired Admiral Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, the fountain of every blessing, we lift our hearts in praise to you, for you have done marvelous things. You direct our steps each day, guiding us with your powerful providence and showering us with undeserved mercies. You hear our prayers and speedily supply our needs. Bless today the work of our lawmakers, empowering them with unceasing awareness and openness of heart. Give them wisdom and courage to glorify you through their work. May their thoughts, words, and actions be acceptable to you, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Democratic Leader.
I move to proceed to calendar number 297.
Clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 297, S-1950, a bill to improve the provision of medical services and benefits to veterans and for other purposes.
Mr. President, following my remarks and those of the Republican leader, the Senate will resume consideration of the conference report of Company H.R. 2642, Farm Bill. Time at 12:30 will be equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or the designates. The Senate will recess from 12:30 to 2:15 today for the weekly caucus meetings. At approximately 2:35, there will be a roll call vote on adoption of the Farm Conference Report. Mr. President, before the presiding officer, while the presiding officer is here, I want to make a brief comment. The headlines the last couple of days have been the death of, in my opinion, one of the great actors of our time, Philip Seymour Hoffman. He died, obviously, of a drug overdose of heroin. The reason I wanted to say a word while the presiding officer is presiding is that the governor of Vermont was very, very visionary in directing his State of the State remarks this year to the scourge that's sweeping the nation of heroin addiction. It's really a scourge. We have people who, it's a kind of a unique thing according to everything that I've been able to learn. We have people who start off with some kind of prescription drugs and then wind up with this stuff that's been prepared by purveyors of evil, not knowing what's in it. There are some who believe that they put baby laxative in this. They put all kinds of stuff that looks like heroin. It's a terrible shame. And so I say to my friend from Vermont, make sure that, and I will send him a letter, but I want to make sure that you personally tell the governor how I can't find a better word, visionary he was in the remarks he gave a few weeks ago.
Mr. President, the senator from Nevada yield.
Senator from Vermont.
Happy to.
Mr. President, as the record would indicate, while I was open the Senate, my role as President pro tempore, now the distinguished senator from New Jersey is in the chair, because I wanted to be able to, one, respond, and two, thank the distinguished senior senator from Nevada for what he said. I was in Montpelier, which is our capital, on Friday, and I spent some time with Governor Shumlin, Governor Peter Shumlin, who did his State of the State message on this subject, as the distinguished senator from Nevada has said. And I talked to him about it, and I will call him later this morning and tell him what the leader has said. I'm also going to, wearing my hat as chair of the Judiciary Committee, do a hearing on this. Ours is a very special and very precious state. But I think it points out that every state in the Union can face this problem. There's a lot in the national news this morning. Governor Shumlin was great to focus the attention of many states. And I'll just close with saying to my dear friend from Nevada, I appreciate his comments. He knows how precious Vermont is to me and to Governor Shumlin, and I'll make sure the governor knows what he said. I yield.
Mr. President, on one other matter.
Majority Leader.
I had a meeting of a number of senators this morning, and one of the topics of conversation was the presiding officer's first speech, the so-called maiden speech that he gave last night. It was stunningly good, substantive, and it came from the heart. And that's what my senators told me this morning. And I agree. As I told the presiding officer last night, I had to go to a quick meeting, but so I watched most of it from my office. But it was a speech that was so important, dealing with people who are in need. And this good man who's presiding over the Senate now is a man of stature, academically extremely talented, Stanford, and decided he would do public service. And in the process of doing public service, he identified with the people who needed help. He moved into a neighborhood that you wouldn't think would the mayor of this city would live, but he did that because he wanted to feel the pulse of the people. And it's obvious from the speech given last night that the presiding officer does understand the pulse of the people of his state. And we all admire you before you got here, and we admire you now even more. Mr. President, I understand that there's a bill at the desk entitled S-1982 due for a second reading.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the second time.
S-1982, a bill to improve the provision of medical services and benefits to veterans and for other purposes.
I object to any further proceedings with respect to this bill at this time.
Objection having been heard, the bill will be placed on the calendar.
Mr. President, last night I had the good fortune yesterday afternoon to spend some time with the President along with Michael Bennett and others. And it was worth commenting on that meeting with the President about his address that he gave a week ago to the Congress and to the nation. He addressed Congress and the nation and described the challenges facing families in America. Wages that are far too low, the cost of education far too high, and simply there are far too few jobs. Each of these challenges places another stumbling block in front of Americans striving to enter the middle class. And also, middle class trying to do their best to hang on to their status as part of the middle class. The middle class is being squeezed, Mr. President. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is being squeezed really hard. Unless we open the doors of opportunity to every child in this nation, our grandchildren will no longer be able to do what we expect our grandchildren to be able to accomplish. Every child in this nation, our grandchildren, will have to work longer and harder than we did just to get by, let alone just to get ahead. Yesterday I read with interest a story, a long, well-researched story in the New York Times. It was in the business section. And that piece argued that the richest families and most successful corporations in America should be just as worried about these trends in the shrinking middle class as I am, and as the presiding officer. The article described the widespread failure of businesses that cater to the middle class. I repeat that, widespread failure of businesses that cater to the middle class. Why? Because the middle class is going away. While high-end retailers like Barney's and Nordstrom flourish, mid-price retailers like JCPenney and Loehmann stumble. Loehmann's filed bankruptcy. While posh restaurant chains like Capital Grille prosper, more modest eateries like Red Lobster are sinking. The Times wrote yesterday, and I'm quoting, as politicians and pundits in Washington continue to spar over whether economic inequality is in fact deepening, in corporate America, there really is no debate at all. The post-recession reality is that the customer base for businesses that appeal to the middle class is shrinking as the top tier pulls even farther away. Industry analysis say businesses that sell luxury goods to the top 1% are booming. And remember, Mr. President, during the past 30 years, the top 1%, their wealth has increased 3 times. While during that same 30-year period of time, the earning capacity of the middle class has been cut by 10%. So the top 1% are booming. And sadly, businesses like Family Dollar that cater to the growing ranks of working poor are barely scraping by. That is, the people that use those facilities. But dollar stores, Family Dollar is the name of the business, they're thriving. Why? Because, Mr. President, Nordstrom's, great place. I love Nordstrom. They got a great return policy. I'm glad they're doing well. But Family Dollar, they're thriving because many people who were middle class are now poor. Families aren't going out for spaghetti and meatballs. They aren't even going out for hamburgers like they used to. They aren't buying their kids new jeans or backpacks. They pass them down from child to child. Mr. President, I can remember, it's been over a year ago, went to this program in North Las Vegas, Nevada. A lot of poor people in North Las Vegas. And they were giving away backpacks with some pencils, and it was before school started, some pencils and some paper. Mr. President, those backpacks were so, I don't want to denigrate the wonderful things that people were doing. They were so cheap. They were backpacks that had names of businesses on them, and these children lined up with their parents for as far as you could see. They were desperate for a backpack. Not a very good one, but they didn't have one. So they aren't buying their kids backpacks like they used to. Purchases that once seemed like modest treats have become unaffordable luxuries. While the economy is growing in spite of this trend, economists worry that growth is unsustainable. One economist told the Times, quote, "It's going to be hard to maintain strong economic growth with such a large proportion of the population falling behind. We might be able to muddle along, but can we really recover? That's a question." In other words, our fortunes are bound together. A shrinking middle class isn't just a problem for families in the middle. It's a problem for businesses large and small. It's a problem that should worry the top 1% of wealth in America as much as it worries the 99% who are under that 1%. Can we really recover when so many of us are falling behind? It's a fair question, an extremely troubling question, Mr. President. Our entire economy is at risk unless we act now to protect and grow the middle class, whose purchase power is the background of our economy. And how can we do that? We can create some jobs, which we as a Congress have not done because every time we try, there's an obstruction from the Republicans. But to achieve and protect and grow the middle class, President Obama called for common sense investments in our future, investments in 21st century infrastructure. You know, those old-fashioned things like roads and bridges and dams and the new renewable energy projects, solar, wind, geothermal, create lots and lots of jobs. Cutting-edge technology, like the new Tesla vehicle, all-electric vehicle. Elon Musk, I've talked to him, he's talking about building another big factory someplace in the West. Investments in universal preschool, so important. Other countries are doing it. Why don't we have it mandatory for every 4-year-old? An affordable college. Mr. President, seated next to me is the assistant leader. He has identified a problem years ago that kids are being burdened with debt, trying to go to college. And frankly, a lot of the money that these young men and women borrow goes to schools that don't produce anything. Investments in medical research. You heard me cough. I, for the first time in my life, a couple of weeks ago, got the flu. I'd never had the flu before. I wasn't nearly as sympathetic with people who missed work because of flu, and I am now sympathetic. The flu is devastating. I was so sick. At my home in Searchlight, we didn't have a thermometer. By the time we had someone went over from Vegas, my fever was very high. And I started the medication, Tamiflu, not as early as I should have, and it went into bronchitis. The reason I mention that, Mr. President, again talking about my friend, the senior senator from Illinois, he went yesterday to NIH, National Institutes of Health. I went there a number of months ago. What we have done as a Congress to NIH, we should be embarrassed. We've cut them. And the reason I mentioned my flu is because when I went there, they are so close to having a flu shot that covers all flu. Everything. They're so close. What do they need to go the extra mile? More money. The devastation of sequestration has hurt the National Institutes of Health significantly. Chairman Murray did some things to help in the future, but that money that we've lost because of sequestration is gone. We have not been fair to the National Institutes of Health. And, Mr. President, those are life-saving things they're doing there. And other countries are trying to match what we have done with the National Institutes of Health. They can't. We're way ahead, but we're going to not remain ahead unless we put some money into the National Institutes of Health. We need to help companies that build their products here in America. I go out of my way, Mr. President, to buy New Balance shoes, running shoes. Why? They're made in America. The suit that I'm wearing, Katie Freeman, made in America. I'm proud of it. The President also called on Congress to increase the federal minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, a huge step toward guaranteeing that no American working full-time lives in poverty, as they now do. And as the presiding officer so well illustrated last night, this proposal, raising the minimum wage, has been endorsed by 7 Nobel Prize-winning economists. I don't know the political persuasion of these Nobel Prize-winning economists, but they're all persuaded that what we have done to the working poor is wrong and we have to do something about it. The proposal would raise millions of families out of poverty and give tens of millions of children a shot at graduating from college, securing a high-paying job, and joining the middle class. There's something else Congress should do this week to prevent hundreds of thousands of Americans from descending into poverty. Extend the unemployment benefits. In the month that we have cut off these benefits because of obstruction by my Republican colleagues, the country has lost more than $2 billion in purchasing. The state of Nevada, $30 million. So we could do something now to prevent hundreds of thousands of Americans from descending into poverty. A 57-year-old woman, I read her part of her letter here yesterday. She said, how do you think I feel going from friend to friend to sleep on their couch? Couch surfing, we call it. She said, that only lasts so long. I'm selling everything I have. I don't have a home. I'm trying to sell everything I have, so if I get an opportunity for a job interview, I can buy gas from my car. We must extend unemployment benefits to 1.6 million people who have been out of work for months. These emergency benefits will ensure that more than 2.3 million children have nutritious meals and a safe place to sleep while their parents hunt for jobs. And renewing emergency unemployment insurance will prevent Americans who have worked hard to get ahead from losing their grip on the ladder of success. Restoring unemployment benefits is by no means enough to secure our shrinking middle class, but it certainly is a good first step.
Mr. President.
The Republican leader.
Over the past several years, I've often come to the floor of the Senate to draw attention to the Obama administration's radical environmental agenda and the deeply harmful effects it is having on the people of Kentucky. The Environmental Protection Agency's war on coal is the most obvious and tragic example. Today, I'd like to highlight this administration's environmental agenda at perhaps its most absurd. And at the heart of our story is a 2.5-inch minnow, 2.5-inch minnow, called the dusky-tail darter, a 2.5-inch minnow called the dusky-tail darter. Last week, the Obama administration sided with this minnow over the economic well-being of thousands of people in southeastern Kentucky who live near or depend on Lake Cumberland as a major driver of commerce, tourism, and recreation. The Obama administration did this by determining that the presence of the darter in the lake's tributaries meant that the raising of the lake's water level must be further delayed. Now, Lake Cumberland is a signature tourist destination in my state and one of the economic pillars of McCreary, Clinton, Laurel, Russell, Pulaski, and Wayne counties. The water level of the lake was lowered back in January of 2007 due to problems with the dam which feeds the lake. The past 7 years of reduced water levels have not only hurt small businesses that rely on tourism, but have also strained local governments as local towns have had to lower their water intake. Marinas have had to spend valuable dollars on boat ramp upgrades and dock relocations, dollars that could have been spent on growing businesses, hiring new workers, and enhancing local commerce. In addition, the drawdown of water has deterred tourism, as a misperception has been created among potential visitors that the lake is no longer suitable for boating, fishing, and water sports. Every year, Lake Cumberland brings to the local community $200 million in economic activity and employs, on average, 6,000 people. Understandably, those in the local community have been anxious to see the water levels return back to their normal level after 7 years of reduced water level. 2014 was supposed to be a great year for Lake Cumberland, as Kentuckians would mark the end of 7 years' worth of repairs to the dam and therefore reduced water levels and fewer visitors. Now, suddenly, the Obama administration has announced that the water level cannot be raised because it could potentially have a harmful effect on this minnow, the dusky-tailed darter, which is on the endangered species list. Now, Mr. President, the absurdity of the Obama administration's posture on this issue is manifest. First, the administration is protecting a fish from water? Let me get this straight. Protecting a fish from water? The radical environmentalists in the Obama administration don't want this fish to be exposed to too much water? What's next? Protecting birds from too much sky? Second, the administration took this action because raising the water could, not would, potentially have an adverse effect on this poor little minnow. Of course, anything in the universe could have an adverse effect on this minnow. But to the people of southeastern Kentucky, the President's year of action is apparently beneficial only if you have gills. So, Mr. President, the story of the darter would be humorous if it weren't so harmful to the economic well-being of thousands of southeastern Kentuckians. This misguided policy will have deeply harmful consequences for this region of Kentucky. Carolyn Mounts, who is responsible for promoting tourism at Lake Cumberland at the Somerset-Pulaski County Convention and Visitors Bureau, put it best when she said, "Bureaucracy run amok." Bureaucracy run amok, said Carolyn Mounts. She just returned from attending tourism and travel shows in Cincinnati and Louisville 2 weeks ago. She says the shows were crowded. People wanted to talk about Lake Cumberland. They were excited about the lake returning to normal operation. And now this. J.D. Hamilton, who operates Lee's Ford Resort Marina on Lake Cumberland in Nancy, Kentucky, was also disappointed to learn of this announcement. Well, disappointed is an understatement, as his business has been stifled by the lowering of water over the last 7 years. In response to this announcement, he said the Corps is keeping its word to the fish, but not to the economy. So yesterday, my friend and colleague, Senator Rand Paul, and I, along with our colleagues in the House, Congressman Rogers and Congressman Whitfield, wrote the administration calling for an end to this intolerable further delay. I hope the Obama administration will take heed and concern itself more with endangered jobs and endangered livelihoods of actual Kentuckians and Americans than with the possible endangerment of this apparently water-averse minnow. Now, Mr. President, on another subject. I want to speak about a young man from my state who gave his life while serving this nation in uniform. Lance Corporal Adam D. Peake of Florence, Kentucky, was tragically killed by an improvised explosive device in Helmand Province on February 21st, 2010. A member of the U.S. Marine Corps, he was 25 years old. For his service in uniform, Lance Corporal Peake received many medals, awards, and decorations, including the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, the Iraq Campaign Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, and the NATO International Security Assistance Force Medal. Born on August 30th, 1984, Adam was a native of Florence, where he grew up with a reputation as a performer who made his friends and family laugh with his quick wit. He and his older sister, Sarah, would quote movie lines back and forth to each other in the blink of an eye, and Adam especially liked to entertain his younger sister, Angela. Adam was sarcastic, with a dry sense of humor, and could get people to laugh all the time, says Adam's mother, Diana. I guess what I loved most about him was his love for his sister, who was born with Down syndrome. He had unlimited patience with her, and I knew that when his dad and I were gone, he would take care of Angela. Although Adam did not get a chance to have a family of his own, he loved kids. He was like a second father to a lot of other Marines kids, says his sister Sarah. Adam's mother certainly agrees. He loved kids and thought that someday he would have a large family, she says. He played Santa every year for his friend's family, and his kids loved him. Adam attended Boone County High School, where he graduated in 2002. He then attended Thomas More College in Crestview Hills, Kentucky. In school, he was active in Alpha Delta Gamma fraternity, the Saints Club, the Education Club, and the Villa Players Theater Club. His mother, Diana, particularly remembers Adam's interest in theater. He developed a love for the stage while in college at Thomas More, she says. He started out behind the scenes, but his friends got him on stage for a play, and he loved it. He appeared in many productions while at school. Richard Shuey, a business administration professor at Thomas More, taught Adam in 3 classes. Adam was one of those really nice, clean-cut Northern Kentucky kids, Richard says, always polite, interested in doing well, obviously a true patriot. One of Adam's fraternity brothers, Caleb Finch, remembered him as a big-hearted, free-spirited, fun-loving guy who would do anything for anybody. After graduation from Thomas More, Adam enlisted in the Marine Corps in July of 2007. By December of that year, he had been promoted to the rank of Lance Corporal. Adam's younger brother, Sean, enlisted in the Marines as well, and the 2 brothers served together in the same unit in Iraq in 2008. Their personalities were night and day, says Robin Peake, Adam's sister-in-law, but they always had each other's backs and were there together. In October 2009, Adam and Sean were deployed to Afghanistan, both as members of the 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marine Division, 2 Marine Expeditionary Force based out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Sean accompanied his brother back home for burial, and Adam was laid to rest with full military honors in Taylor Mill, Kentucky. Mr. President, we're thinking of Adam's loved ones today, including his parents, Bruce and Diana, his brother Sean, his sisters Sarah and Angela, his sister-in-law Robin, and many other beloved family members and friends. The loss of Lance Corporal Adam D. Peake is tragic. And indeed, it is only appropriate that this United States Senate pause to honor his service and recognize his sacrifice. I hope that his family can take some comfort from the fact that both the Commonwealth of Kentucky and the country as a whole are grateful for and honored by the heroism and courage Adam displayed in his entirely too short life. And the example he set for his loved ones and his country will not be forgotten. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the conference report to accompany H.R. 2642, which the clerk will report.
Conference report to accompany H.R. 2642, an act to provide for the reform and continuation of agricultural and other programs of the Department of Agriculture through fiscal year 2018 and for other purposes.
Under the previous order, the time until 12:30 p.m. will be equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees.
Mr. President.
The Assistant Majority Leader.
Mr. President, before I address the Farm Bill, I would like to make two other points. And the first is I would like to commend the presiding officer. Yesterday he gave his first speech on the floor of the United States Senate. About 20 of us were here and listened carefully. And I'm glad I did. It was time well spent. It was a speech which the presiding officer clearly not only worked on, but believed in. And it showed. You addressed the plight of working Americans, and particularly those who have lost their jobs, and the responsibility of this Congress and this nation to stand by these families while they're in transition looking for new opportunities. And I sat here and listened and watched as you spoke to this subject, addressing specific people that you've met in your state who told you their stories. And I thought to myself, I've met quite a few in Illinois in like circumstances. And I wish that every member of the Senate would do what you have done, visit the towns, the restaurants, the veterans centers, and others, places where unemployed people gather, and listen to them. The point that you made so convincingly was those who dismiss the unemployed as just lazy people have never met them. They're not lazy. They were workers who want to work again. What they're asking for is a helping hand, and you made that point so eloquently yesterday. What was particularly good for me, having served in the Senate for a number of years, was to hear a new member of the Senate in his first speech really reach back to the values which inspired many of us to run for this position. It's easy to become jaded after you've been here for a while and been engaged in the petty political fights that take place here with some frequency. It's easy to forget why you asked your family to stand behind you when you ran, and why you sacrificed to try to come to this place, and why each of us, some 1,200 or so who've had this distinct honor to serve in the Senate, should not miss the opportunity to bring our values and passion to the floor every single day. So I thank the senator from New Jersey, our presiding officer, for an extraordinary maiden speech, first speech on the floor of the United States Senate. It was one of the best. Secondly, I'd like to address the issue that was raised by my colleague from the state of Kentucky. The state of Kentucky is just south of Illinois. We have coal fields too. Almost 75% of our state has coal under the ground. We mine that coal, not like we used to, but still mine it and use it. And we have coal miners and coal companies, and coal is an important part of the Illinois economy. And the senator from Kentucky came to the floor today to really take exception to a decision by the Environmental Protection Agency as it affected coal country in Kentucky. I don't know anything about the particulars of his complaint involving the Cumberland Lake and the Endangered Species Act, so I won't address that. But I do want to address one more general topic. To argue that the Environmental Protection Agency is the enemy of coal country is to completely ignore what's been in the newspapers for the last several weeks. There are 300,000 people in the state of West Virginia who are afraid to drink the water because of a leak from a tank that had a chemical solution used for cleaning coal. These people worry that drinking this water, cooking with this water, even bathing in this water is a danger to them. And where did they turn for some indication of safety for their families, this part of America, West Virginia, coal country, just like Kentucky and Illinois, turned to the Environmental Protection Agency. Of course they did. Is it safe? Can my child drink this water safely? Can I use it for cooking? So to argue that the Environmental Protection Agency is the enemy of coal country is to ignore the obvious. They can make wrong decisions. We all do. Agencies do. But time and again, when we're in trouble, when it comes to something as basic as the safety of our drinking water, we turn to the Environmental Protection Agency and the Center for Disease Control and ask them to help us determine whether that water is safe. And let me add parenthetically, Mr. President, your predecessor, Senator Frank Lautenberg of New Jersey, was a leader, and I was happy to be his partner in trying to get to the bottom of the danger of many of these chemicals. Most Americans mistakenly believe that this government reviews the toxicity or danger of all the chemicals in use in this country. In fact, only a small percentage are ever reviewed by the government. We, in fact, trust those who make and sell these chemicals to do the right thing. And many times they betray that trust and sell something dangerous on the market, which we discover later after the damage has been done. So again, the role of the Environmental Protection Agency, the Center for Disease Control, the role of the federal government in monitoring these chemicals for the safety of businesses and families and individuals across America is essential, whether you live in the city of Newark or Chicago or coal country, USA. So if we're going to go to war against the Environmental Protection Agency, let us at least be honest about the critical role they play. And I hope that that is remembered as we reflect on some of the things said on the floor this morning. Mr. President, this is the conference report for the Agricultural Act of 2014. And Senator Stabenow was on the floor earlier. She stepped off now. She has poured her heart and soul into this document and into this work. 2 years ago, we passed the Farm Bill on the floor of the Senate. 2 years ago. She did it with Senator Roberts of Kansas. I voted for it. And I thought it was an exceptional effort on her part. It went to the U.S. House of Representatives, as is the custom under the Constitution, to wither and die 2 years ago. And then a year ago, they said, let's try again. Let's pass the Farm Bill again in the United States Senate in the hopes that the U.S. House of Representatives will take it up. A year ago. Mr. President, I asked if you restore order in the Senate chamber.
The Senate will be in order.
So a year ago, Senator Stabenow and Senator Roberts sent this measure to the House of Representatives for consideration. And again, it languished. It may have been one of the longest-running conference committees in the history of Congress. But thank goodness for the perseverance of Senator Stabenow and many others. They produced this document. Now, for those who don't live in farm country, this may seem like a foreign text. But for those of us who do live, just reading the table of contents will tell you the important elements of this bill and why it is so critically important to Illinois, virtually every state in the Union. And I commend her. I commend Senator Stabenow. She really, as I said, poured her heart and soul into this document. There are things in here which many of us may never really appreciate, that she fought for over a long, long period of time. And I'm going to acknowledge a few of those during the course of my formal remarks. But while she's here on the floor, let me give special credit to my colleague. She really took on this task and did it in an extraordinary way. After years of explorations and short-term extensions, primarily due to the problems and inaction in the House of Representatives, this bill finally is going to provide farmers in Illinois and across the nation with some guarantee of certainty on their future. Compared to pre-sequestration budget levels, that's budget talk around here for past budgets, this bill is going to save $23 billion over the next 10 years. This conference report before us really works to do four things. Invest in energy and research, help our rural communities grow. Those of us who represent small-town America know how important that is. Ensure stability for our farmers, who face the vicissitudes of weather and markets and provide food assistance for those most in need both here and overseas. These are amazing and important goals. I'm glad Senator Stabenow and all the conferees really applied themselves to make this happen. I am disappointed by one thing, and I know Senator Stabenow will not be surprised. Despite modest reforms, we still provide extraordinary, outsized premium support for many farmers who buy crop insurance. In fairness, this bill eliminates a price support program that was no longer defensible, a program that paid farmers in good times as well as bad. So it really wasn't what it was designed to be, emergency help for farmers in need. And she eliminated the direct payment program by and large, and that to me is a step forward. Instead, this bill moves farmers toward crop insurance. And most of us stepping back say, well, that sounds like the responsible thing to do. A farmer buys an insurance policy, so if things go bad on the farm, a flood, a drought, some other problem, or the prices happen to be disastrous, when the farmer goes to market, the insurance policy will make sure that they can live to plan again. That is a good thing. But as I've said several times, anytime you put the two words federal and insurance in the same sentence, I advise my colleagues step back and ask some questions. This is not insurance as you envision it. It isn't a matter of automobile insurance where the automobile owners pay enough in premiums to create a reserve to cover the exposure of accidents. Different. Under the crop insurance program, like many federal insurance programs, there is a massive federal subsidy. 62% of the reserves that are necessary to make the program function are provided by the federal treasury, not by premiums paid by farmers. So it's a good program, it's a valuable program, it is critically important. But let's keep our mind on the reality here. It is heavily subsidized by the federal government. Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, a very conservative Republican, and I decided to offer an amendment which said if you are a farmer whose income is over $750,000 a year, we will reduce slightly the government subsidy of your crop insurance. Over $750,000 in income, we will reduce slightly the 62% federal subsidy on your crop insurance. You will pay slightly more in premiums because you're able to. You're better off than most. This passed not once but twice on the floor of the United States Senate, and it turned out the conferees, primarily from the House, hated this provision like the devil hates holy water. And so they struck this provision from the bill. And that's unfortunate. Not only did we pass it twice, the House had passed an instruction to conferees to include it on the floor. Members wanted to be on record saying they liked this idea. And when the conferees got their hands on it, they lopped it right out of the bill. Let me ask you to hold on to that thought for a moment while I get into another section of the bill. The area where the House conferees really worked up an appetite was when it came to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the so-called food stamp program. And again, let me commend Senator Stabenow, as chairman of the Agriculture Committee. She called me several times to tell me about the battles that she had to wage to protect the food stamp SNAP program. Let's talk about the program for a minute. Almost 15% of households across America have trouble keeping food on the table. SNAP, the food program, provides 47 million Americans with essential food assistance. 83% of the households that receive food stamps include a child or a person with disability or a senior citizen. Nearly 1 million veterans use the food stamp program each year in America. In Illinois, over 2 million people, almost 1 in 7 residents, rely on SNAP benefits to buy the food they need. Now, who are these people? Who in the world needs food stamps in a great state like the state of Illinois? Well, let me tell you about 2 or 3 of them. One of them was the elderly lady that I met at the Irving Park Methodist Church food pantry. She was on a walker. She had a very short haircut, suggesting that perhaps she'd been through some chemotherapy or radiation, and she soldiered her way right up there to get a bag of groceries and sat down, and I talked to her. And I said to her, can you tell me a little bit about how you're doing? Sure, Senator, I'm doing okay. I get $800 a month in Social Security, she said. I said, how in the world do you live in Chicago on $800 a month? Ain't easy, Senator. Got to pay the rent, got to pay the utility bills and the basics. And, she says, I come to this food pantry and one other one. Each one of them gives me 3 days' worth of food. So I get about 1 month, 6 days' worth of food out of the two food pantries, and I thank them for that. And I get food stamps worth about $130 a month. That's it, folks. That's what she lives on, an elderly person. And when the House Republicans said, what we need to do is cut $40 billion, that was their original recommendation, $40 billion out of food stamps, they apparently had never met this lady and what she was up against. Or they might have met a couple workers that I had a press conference with on Sunday in Chicago, working full-time and qualifying for food stamps. One was a fellow who works on the west side of Chicago at a used car lot. Does it all, he says. Cleans the cars, shovels the lots, sells the cars, and gets paid $8.25 an hour, which is our state minimum wage. 4 kids. His wife's sick and can't work. He gets food stamps, and he needs them. For food on the table for kids, for a full-time worker at a minimum wage job. Then on the other side was a lady who's a waitress. And she told the story of being a single mom. Her son's now 19. She's heading him off to the city colleges of Chicago. That's a great deal. But she works a job which has a guaranteed minimum wage in Illinois of about $4.50 an hour. That's what waitresses are guaranteed, tip wage. Nationally, the tip wage is $2.13 an hour. She says, I don't work in a fancy restaurant, and I'm lucky to come home with $10 or $20 in tips on a day. So do the math. And she said, some days they don't call me into work. I get nothing. She relies on food stamps, too. A woman who's ready to work and works hard, standing up all day, waiting tables. So in come the House Republicans and say, well, we really need to come down hard on these people, these lazy people on food stamps. I wish they would meet some of these folks who use food stamps to get by, to survive. These people are our neighbors. They're hardworking people who lost their jobs or got sick. They're seniors living on a limited fixed income. Now, this bill does cut $8 billion out of the SNAP program, the food stamp program. I understand the cuts that were made, and I think that Senator Stabenow and others have done these carefully. I don't want any fraud in this program. She doesn't either. And we think we have tightened it up so it will not affect the payments to those who are truly eligible and those who need the help, and yet it'll make sure the taxpayers are treated fairly as well. But look at the contrast. Some of the conferees walked into this hearing and said that farmers who make almost $1 million a year should not have any reduction in their subsidy for crop insurance, but people like the lady at the Irving Park Methodist Church food pantry being paid $8 a month, we ought to take a hard look, a hard look at the $130 a month we give this lady. That's upside down. That doesn't reflect the values of this country or the priorities that we need to face. And I thank the senator from Michigan. She worked long and hard, was a real champion when it came to the SNAP program, the food stamp program. Incidentally, Mr. President, the good news is as the economy improves and people get back to work, the number of people on food stamps is going down, which is what we want to see. But doesn't it say something about us as a nation, a caring, compassionate nation, that we are going to be there to help those families living in our towns, in our state, going to our churches when they're struggling to put food on the table? Why was that such an inviting target for some of the House conferees? I don't understand that. There's a lot of money that can be saved in government. We don't want to waste a penny of it. But let's focus primarily on those who can afford to pay and are getting a federal subsidy as opposed to those who are just struggling to get by and are asking for a helping hand. This bill does so many things I couldn't even start to describe all the different areas dealing with risk on the farm, key investments in energy and research, ag research, programs to help rural communities grow, and helping those in need. Most importantly, this reauthorization gives Illinois farmers certainty about farm programs, and they need it, something they haven't had for the last 3 years. I'm going to support this bill. I wish that we'd been able to preserve that provision that Senator Coburn and I included, but I believe on balance it is an important step forward in farm country across America, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Arizona.
As the Senate turns its attention this week to the Farm Bill Conference Report, my thoughts turn to the Wild West to put its provisions in context. Frankly, its 950 pages lend themselves to talking about the good, the bad, and the just plain ugly. I mention the good because while this Farm Bill falls far short of gaining my support, it's not entirely without provisions worth highlighting. Conferees included a one-term extension of the Payment in Lieu of Taxes, or PILT, program. That gives temporary predictability, at least, for counties with low tax bases due to federal land ownership, and provides Congress with time to chart a long-term solution in this regard. In addition, the bill authorizes permanently the Stewardship Contracting Authority. This is a critical land management tool that allows us to proactively reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfires. It's one that I've long called for. While reforms to the liability requirements are also included, the report fails to include necessary flexibility on cancellation ceilings, and that's something that I'll continue to work on in the future. Sadly, when it comes to the bad, there's not enough time to list all the items in the report that should make any lawmaker cringe who is concerned about our crushing national debt or those of us trying to reform agricultural policy. Rather than truthfully trimming the already generous agricultural safety net, taxpayers should prepare for yet another round of entirely new alphabet soup subsidy programs. Senator from Illinois explained very well the crop insurance program that is so heavily subsidized. 62%. I think all of us with auto insurance or other types of insurance would love to have that kind of contribution from the federal government. This report doesn't even provide common sense reforms that limit waste and largesse to sustained hallmarks of agriculture subsidies. The report also fails to limit agricultural payments to those who are actually involved in farming. It can't even provide a reasonable income limit, as was discussed by the senator from Illinois, for those who already receive crop insurance subsidies. And incomprehensibly, any recognition of the arrangement between crop insurers and the federal government would be required to be revenue neutral, despite billions of dollars in taxpayer savings having been found in previous renegotiations. This bill is purported to be fiscally conservative because it saves $16 billion or so in tax dollars. Before we pat each other on the back in this regard, we need to remember that Congress has a pretty dismal record of actually knowing how much farm bills are going to cost. According to Taxpayers for Common Sense, quote, the last two farm bills are on pace to exceed their Congressional Budget Office score by more than $400 billion. And there's no assurance that this farm bill will be any different. Now let's get to the ugly. For years, direct payments have been one of the clearest signs of what needs to be changed in federal spending. Federal government has been handing out roughly $5 billion a year to farmers regardless of whether they are farming the land. I want to pay tribute to the senator from Michigan who has fought to end these direct payments, and the Senate did a pretty good job there, but the House did not. I myself have long sought to end these direct payments. I was encouraged with the Senate action to end these payments outright. But despite our fiscal situation, the best we could get in the House was allowing direct payments to continue, albeit slightly reduced, cotton for 2014 and 2015. This conference report purports to end direct payments, but ends them in name only for cotton. Let's be clear, it simply renames direct payments for cotton for 2 years. They'll now be called transition payments. Cotton growers will continue to receive payments until, wait for it, the other new subsidy programs created in this report come online. Perhaps instead of Western movies, I should have conjured up images of Shakespeare to describe this fiscal tragedy. A government-funded handout by another name is still a government-funded handout. It's also worth recalling that when originally created in 1996, in the 1996 Farm Bill, direct payments went by the name AMTA payments, or Agricultural Market Transition Assistance Payments. It would appear that for some commodities there will always be a transition for something or from something to something else that will result in a taxpayer-funded handout. According to the CBO score, the report actually takes the zero cost from the Senate proposal and the $443 billion cost from the House proposal and compromises at a higher cost of $556 billion in 2015. That's some compromise to go well above both the House and the Senate numbers. While the 10-year score for the transition payments in the report is lower than the House proposal, the first-year costs are actually higher. It is at this point that one can simply stop being surprised at what will happen when it comes to farm subsidies. Sadly, rather than a blockbuster of fiscal sanity, taxpayers are going to be saddled with what looks like to be another rerun of missed opportunities to reform federal agricultural policy. Though livestock groups have decried the absence of fixes in ongoing regulatory problems, and fiscal conservatives are chafing at the continued waste in this spending in this report is still likely to be adopted. There are other issues addressed that I'm pleased that some of this will end up on the President's desk, but I cannot support this conference report, and I'll continue to push for real fiscal discipline in federal agriculture policy. I should note, I remember when I first got to Congress, or just about a year after, I came to the floor of the House to rail against the Farm Bill at that time in 2002, the reauthorization. We had gone in the 1990s from the Freedom to Farm Act to the Farm Security Act. Now, for those of us conservatives who talk about moving from freedom to security and all that means, that was actually in the title of the bill, and we haven't improved much since that time. That was more than a decade ago, and I have to say that we should have made progress that is simply not made in this bill. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The senator from Ohio.
Thanks, President. I rise today to discuss legislation I think that benefits all Americans, and that is particularly my home state of Ohio, the Farm Bill. I appreciate Senator Flake